Welcome to another webinar from TurnOnDynamics. I'm Peter Jekyll. Today's offering is when not to upgrade from Dynamics AX to D365 and our Fast 5 critical factors to consider. Hopefully you're going to learn a lot to be able to ask the right questions if you're undergoing this process. So without any further ado, Peter Jekyll on the line here, and we've got Ajaz available in case there's any detailed technical questions that anybody wants to dig into. With the information that you're getting here is based on our actual experience, and the folks that you're talking to here have 50 plus years of ERP experience. So this is, you're not talking to, somebody that's just trying to figure this out. For the folks that can only make it through less than 5 minutes of a webinar, which is, I think, includes myself sometimes. I've, worked on, dozens of upgrades and different products, including AX, right, from one version to another. And the thing that you have to realize is this is completely unlike any upgrade process you've ever undergone, potentially with any other product, right? Obviously, I don't know every ERP product in the history of the world. I'm sure there's SAP horror shows, but in our world, right, in that mid-market and especially that Microsoft world, this is completely different than anything anybody has ever experienced. So really do your homework carefully and don't underestimate the potential costs and complexity of these projects. So as I said, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, and you only have the 5 minutes, that's the big takeaway for me. So let's go on and take a look at our first first factor, right? As far as when do we potentially not upgrade, and this is based on actual experience of companies that we have worked with. So cost is the first one, and everybody said, okay, Pete, well, fantastic, that is real obvious, right? But it's actually not obvious, okay? Because people have an expectation of what an upgrade is in relation to how much it costs them to implement a piece of software, right? And this is so completely different based on actual experience with our own customers and with other customers that we're working with and consulting them on the process, that this is, while cost is typically the overriding factor in a lot of software, ERP software projects, it's even more so for these upgrades. Think of a couple of recent examples. A company that did a recent upgrade, right? And their initial implementation of AX about somewhere between 2 and 3 years ago was X. And the initial upgrade budget was 2X. And before everything was completed and the company had added all their change orders and all the other things that they wanted to do based on the upgrade, it was even bigger than that and is now rapidly approaching 4 times X. The funny thing about that is, if you think about that, that's 4 times the cost of the original implementation. The odd thing about this project is that it was completed on time based on the customer's expectations, and they're actually happy with the result. But again, think about within your organization, if you pull together the costs for your initial implementation of AX and you take those dollars and said, okay, it might be twice that much, or it may be 3-4 times that much, what would that reaction be, right? So that's so the cost on this is completely different than people are used to expect. Next, the next big item. We have had companies that have gone out and literally received quotes from a half dozen or more partners on their upgrades. And one of the large enterprise companies that I work with came back with quotes that were literally from the $400,000 to the $5 million range, right? And anytime you get that kind of disparity in cost estimates, something's wrong somewhere, right? Somebody has missed the boat, something is wrong. And so it's inherent on anybody undergoing, looking at undergoing one of these projects, that they have the ability to dig into, what makes up that, what makes up those costs. For folks that are going to be working with Microsoft, and we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about, how you work with Microsoft on this. They are working on a quoting tool that will give you the opportunity to get a better handle on what those estimates are, but those aren't readily available right now, but Microsoft is working on that. And that leads us into our next slide. This is what I call the magic number. And the magic number, for all intents and purposes, is all about Microsoft. This is all about Microsoft, and the magic number for the factor number 2 on folks not upgrading is 150. It is 150 users of your AX implementation, because if you are below 150 users and you do the upgrade process, then you fall into kind of that category B as far as Microsoft is concerned on their upgrade processes, and you have access to a library of documentation to process that upgrade. If you are above 150 users, you get a dedicated architect, and that architect, is from Microsoft, obviously, from that upgrade team, that fast track upgrade team, and they assist you with your process. Having worked on these projects, I cannot begin to tell you the necessity of that technical expertise directly from Microsoft. One of the things that you'll find out as you go through this project is that the access that you have to your environments, your backups, all of that is much, much more controlled by Microsoft than typically it was, in the old days, things were controlled by yourself or your partners. So now access is much more limited, and there are a ton of technical pieces that are very mysterious because they're kind of hidden behind this, behind this cloud, so to speak. And having access to how these things are actually working and how to process them is critical. So there are huge benefits to being above that 150 user threshold, because that might put you over over that edge where you're able to access that technical expertise from Microsoft as part of the implementation process to ensure a good implementation. Number 3, and what's interesting about this is all of these factors are not only factors that we've discovered in our work, but if you listen to our podcast with the folks from Microsoft, these are also areas that they've identified. ISVs are critical. The more ISVs that you critically need to run your business today, the more careful you have to be as far as them being readily available and certified to work when you upgrade. And there is no master list of ISV solutions that work with the D365. And so there's 2 things. You can go into App Source and hunt down your ISV solutions one by one and see what App Source has to say about that. And then you have to go out and check to make sure that the ISV actually can give you referenceable accounts where they have actually upgraded with a customer. One of the things that we have found is that we literally on a recent project, we had a very good, very, very strong, very good, technically great ISV that when we talked to them about the upgrade project with our customer, they quoted a price of X to reinstall their solution, and 3 times X to attempt an upgrade, because the risk for them, they thought, to do an upgrade of their project as part of the customer's environment was so great that they wanted to charge a huge premium to attempt an upgrade as opposed to re-implementation. So if you take a look at the ISVs that are critical to your company, Have any of those been replaced, perhaps, by functionality in D365? So that's one thing you could look at. The other one is a critical ISV, on that list of, good to go in the D365 universe. And can they back that up with actual customer, stories, good customer stories? And then, what is the actual cost, not only to have that ISV do the upgrade, but the potential cost of having to do a reimplementation as opposed to them being able to do an upgrade because of the, the technology involved. So ISV is a big thing you need to take a look at. The next factor on whether you should be upgrading today or not, or holding it off, is the customization piece. So one of the things about customizations is that customizations take on multiple types of what in the AX world are called objects. Okay, so objects are bytes of code that can be very small, very large, very simple, very complex, and they fall into different types of objects. So a form that somebody fills out when they're in the software is an object. A report is an object, right? A complex piece of integration work with a legacy system is an object, right? Some very light or very heavy duty custom functionality that you've written is an object. And so what's key here is you have to be able to understand, do those objects, right? Are those objects able to upgrade to that next version of the software, okay? And perhaps is that, are those software changes that you've made, do they exist in the new software so that we don't have to upgrade them? So one of the things that we have found is that, very small customers with heavy modifications are not ready to do an upgrade because from a cost standpoint. And then we have found that very large customers are not ready for an upgrade because of their customizations. So what's the, what is the, what's the trick and what's the, what's the path there? Well, one of the things that we recommended, and this got, we got a second from the folks at Microsoft really, is if you don't have those resources available today to be able to really dig into all of those objects that are, especially the custom objects that you have in your system today, and can take advantage of the help that Microsoft gives you, by being one of those folks that's over 100 and 150 users, then the best advice today is try to get your AX to the latest and greatest version of AX and clean up your custom code, right? So perhaps that means that the latest and greatest version of AX may allow you to get rid of some of that custom code that you have, right? And now you have more of a vanilla system. But the more you can do to take your existing version of your AX and strip it down to its vanilla code, right? The better off you will be than to do that conversion to the D365 environment in the future. So a couple of things there, right? First, it allows you to clean it up, stabilize the software, perhaps start taking advantage of some functionality that's available to you for free in the latest and greatest version of AX. And as time passes and there is more experience, doing these upgrades, the chances are that the upgrades will be more efficient and perhaps more less expensive for you. So critical item is taking a look, into this, into this customization piece. The last area we want to take a look at, obviously seems completely self-serving from our standpoint, but really it's really important to take a look at the, at the partner that you're dealing with, especially if you fall underneath that 150, user threshold, and you can't get that hands-on help from Microsoft, and you have to, you have to depend 100% on the experience of the implementation team. That is going to be absolutely critical, right? So, for example, there's a partner you're working with. Do they have a quoting tool that accurately analyzes your system in terms of a similar way that Microsoft is developing a tool for bigger partners, right? On the other hand, is maybe you don't want to buy off on the upgrade process, right? So that Microsoft actually works with you, because in order for Microsoft to work with you, even if you're above that 150 user license count, you have to buy off on that initial 20 user licenses, right, for the D365. So if you're using the analysis, kind of tire kicking phase, maybe you don't want to buy those initial 20 licenses in order to be able to take advantage of things like a quoting tool, or what we call the deprecated object tool, where you go in and you find out the customizations and things in your piece of software that have to be changed in order to be able to do the upgrade. So make sure that the quoting capability is based on some kind of technical expertise, some deep knowledge of what these objects are, and how they have to be quoted for an upgrade. It'd be nice to have dedicated teams, right? Because these projects are so different from a typical implementation that having a dedicated project team, I think, is a tremendous advantage, right? Because there are some things that you don't think that you're going to need, such as Azure skills, that as you're, when you first start thinking about these upgrade processes, you don't realize that, oh, I'm going to need an Azure expert. And then you go out and you find an Azure expert, and you might be the brightest guy ever in Azure, and he looks at you and goes, well, what is Dynamics 365, right? So there's all kinds of things that you don't know until you actually get into the process of doing this. And so I think it's super critical for you to be able to go through this process with somebody that's actually gone through the process and can tell you if, instead of let's jump right into the D365 excitement, let's stabilize our system and make this a two-step process. So those are our five, those are our fast five factors, the most critical things that we, that we have found. And as I said, largely backed up by the Microsoft team in our last podcast with them, where they joined us. And so what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Carrie and see if anybody's got any questions.
Hi there. I do have a couple of questions. The first is this: are there service options you can purchase from Microsoft if you're below 150 users but need the help?
Oh, very interesting. I actually talked with one of our clients this afternoon. Yes, there are. And I know this from working with a client on a project that we just recently had, and their management negotiated with Microsoft sales team because they were under the 150 threshold, but they wanted some of that, direct Microsoft skill set. And the only issue we had was that for the level of service that they wanted, it was a commitment of $80,000 for a year. Evidently, there might have been some $40,000 possibility, but it didn't have the level of support they were looking for. So under that 150 user count, there is an option, but it is expensive.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, what if we wanted the cloud option because of aging hardware, but find that the D365 move is not yet appropriate? What do you recommend?
That's a question that we've also kind of hit on with several customers. I think, the move to the cloud is a great opportunity for, all the reasons of not having to manage your internal IT type of stuff, right? And a lot of folks that are currently on AX, taking a look at, the upgrade, one of the things, one of the driving factors is, hey, we got to get rid of this hardware that's being, held together with chewing gum and Bondo, right? So how do we take advantage of the cloud But oh my gosh, by taking advantage of the cloud, that means going to this D365. And after we, go through this whole analysis, wow, it's going to take us incredible amounts of resources that we're not willing to commit right now to do that. Well, to me, why not take a look at, taking your current software, getting it on the latest and greatest version of AX, once again, to take a look at, settle the whole system down, pull out as many non-needed, modifications that you can, take advantage of the latest and greatest functionality, and work with a cloud partner, because there's lots of cloud partners that are doing a fantastic job of hosting AX and have done so for many, many years. So what you can do there is you can kind of two-step that process from where you are on your own in-house hardware and an aging system, settle it down, get it to the latest and greatest version in AX, take advantage of that, and clean up the system, in this, in quote unquote the cloud, and then have it prepped for a more, effective, efficient, cost-effective upgrade a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road.
Okay, and finally, this is the last question. Is it true that unless we buy the 20 user minimum D365 license, we don't have access to the tools in LCS?
Okay, that sounds like somebody knows a little bit of inside baseball there. So LCS is short for Lifecycle Services, and that is the tool that you use to access your D365 environment. So kind of think if you have have Office 365 and you go into the go on the web and go into the admin page where you add users and subtract users. It's kind of that similar type of interface. So inside of LCS, you have these tools like the one Microsoft is developing to be able to do quoting, but they also have the tools to set up a demo environment, etc. And this tool that takes a look at your current AX system and tells you what needs to change, what differences there are between that and what can effectively move up to the cloud, which they call that deprecated objects, right? It's over here, it's not going to be over here, you got to fix it in between. And yes, you can't test drive that stuff, right? So what you have to do is you have to kind of get into the pool there with the D365 licensing, and the D365 licensing starts at 20 user minimum, right? So there is that investment. And if you're in a situation where, like I said, you're kind of early in the evaluation, just kicking the tires, we found that companies not ready to jump into that, right? So especially, under that 150 user limit, where, not having that engineer to answer some, more hardcore questions really isn't that attractive. So again, so that's a great opportunity to, if you have a partner that specializes in these upgrade processes, they have those coding tools and they have the ability to, take a look at your AX system and discover what those deprecated objects are, or the stuff that's not going to fit into the D365, and how to manage those differences. All right, some next steps. Keep on following the podcast and blog series. We've got some great, next blogs, on the drawing board and podcasts plan. It's the upgrade journey. It's on MS Dynamics World, and it's also on our upgrade blogs on our website on TurnOnDynamics. And if you have any specific questions and you'd like to talk about your upgrade project, shoot us a note. My email address right there, pjekyll@turnondynamics.com. Thank everybody for attending, and have a great day.